So you want to own a Formula One team. In 2018, Lawrence Stroll bought a struggling midfield outfit called Racing Point for under $100 million. Most people in the paddock treated it as a billionaire's expensive hobby. By 2023, that same team, now rebranded Aston Martin, was valued at over $1.3 billion. More than 10 times growth, and it happened without the team winning a single race, without a single profitable season on the books. That is not a fluke. That is the entire modern economics of Formula One in one transaction. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly why a sport famous for bankrupting its participants for 70 years suddenly turned into one of the most reliable wealth machines in global sports. Start with what changed, because everything downstream of this one decision explains the whole business. In 2021, Formula One's commercial owner, Liberty Media, introduced two things at the same time: a hard cost cap on what teams are allowed to spend building and running their cars, and a new Concord agreement that dramatically equalized how prize money gets split. Before this, teams like Manor Racing, Caterham and HRT collapsed one after another through the mid-2010s, unable to survive on prize money alone, while wealthier rivals spent without limit. The cost cap started at $145 million per season in 2021, and has since climbed to $215 million for the 2026 season to account for inflation and away. New technical categories. That single number changed everything downstream, because for the first time in the sport's history, a floor existed under how much a team could lose. Here's the part that actually explains the valuations. Formula One generated $3.87 billion in commercial revenue in 2025. Roughly 45% of that, close to $1.4 billion, gets redistributed to the 10 teams through the Concord Agreement's prize money formula. That formula itself is worth understanding, because it is not a simple equal split. 75% is paid out based on where a team finished in last season's Constructors' Championship. 20% rewards historical performance, top 3 finishes across the preceding 10 seasons. And 5% is a guaranteed heritage payment that goes to exactly one team, Ferrari, written into every version of the Concord Agreement since the sport began tracking it. In recognition of being the only constructor to have raced in every Formula One season since 1950. That heritage clause alone explains a genuinely strange fact from the 2025 season. Ferrari finished 4th in the Constructors' Championship and still collected the largest single prize money payout of any team, $277.7 million. $112 million more than McLaren, who actually won the championship that year. Finishing position matters. Being Ferrari matters more. Now let's talk about what it costs to actually get a seat at this table, because the door has become almost as expensive as the NFL's. When General Motors brought Cadillac onto the grid in 2026 as the 11th team, it had to pay something called an anti-dilution fee, $450 million. Split equally among the 10 existing teams, $45 million each, purely as compensation for shrinking everyone else's future slice of the prize pool. That number itself tells you how fast this market is moving. The original anti-dilution fee, written into the 2021 Concord Agreement, was $200 million. By the time Cadillac actually paid it in 2026, the teams had negotiated it up to $450 million. And reports on the next agreement cycle suggest the teams are already pushing for $600 to $700 million for whoever tries to join after that. Every year you wait to buy in, the entry price for a new competitor gets more expensive, purely because the value of what's already on the grid keeps climbing. Once you're in, the revenue side gets genuinely interesting, because a modern F1 team doesn't primarily make its money from racing at all. Take McLaren's 2025 season as the clearest example available. The team ran a record 53 active commercial sponsorship partnerships that year, generating over $148 million in sponsorship revenue alone, more than any team in the sport's history. Their 3 largest partners were Google at $40 million a year, British American Tobacco at $30 million, and the crypto exchange OKX at $25 million annually. None of those brands are paying for lap times. They're paying for a car that appears on television in over 180 countries every 2 weeks for 9 months of the year. Carrying their logo past hundreds of millions of eyeballs, whether the car finishes first or 15th. Combine that sponsorship revenue with the guaranteed Concord Agreement prize money. And most teams on the modern grid now clear over $300 million a year in combined income before you even ask whether the car is fast. This is the mechanism behind the valuation numbers you keep seeing in the news. The average Formula One team was valued at $231 billion in 2024. By 2025, that average had climbed to $3.42 billion, more than double what it was just 2 years earlier in 2023. Ferrari alone sits around $4.78 billion, and recent private share sales in the Mercedes team have put its valuation above $6 billion. With analysts suggesting Ferrari and Mercedes are both approaching the $10 billion mark within the next few years. Even the teams that finish at the back of the grid now carry valuations above $1.5 billion, not because they're winning anything, but because the cost cap guarantees they structurally cannot burn through money the way backmarker teams used to. The floor under the business is now higher than the ceiling most owners ever expected to reach a decade ago. But the cost cap that created all of this stability cuts both ways, and here is where the enforcement side of this business gets real. In 2021, Red Bull Racing was found to have exceeded the season's $145 million cost cap by roughly £1.8 million, about 1.6% over the limit. In the very first year, the cap was fully enforced. The FIA's investigation found the team had misclassified costs across 13 separate categories: catering, sick pay, unused spare parts, among others. None of which the governing body concluded was intentional or fraudulent. The penalty: a $7 million fine, plus something that actually hurt far more than the fine itself. A 10% reduction in the team's aerodynamic testing and wind tunnel allowance for the entire following season. In a sport where car performance is decided by fractions of a second gained through aerodynamic development, losing a tenth of your development time is a competitive wound that follows a team around the track for an entire year, long after the $7 million check is cleared. That's the actual teeth behind the cost cap. It's not just an accounting rule. It's a governor built directly into how fast your car is allowed to become. So here's the final balance sheet, collapsed into one sentence: heritage-weighted revenue split, plus a sponsorship market now worth over $300 million a year, to a single team has converted a sport that used to bankrupt its own participants into one of the most. A hard cost cap, plus a guaranteed, reliably appreciating brand platforms in global business, and the valuations prove it every single time a new buyer walks through the door. Lawrence Stroll didn't buy a race team in 2018. He bought a global media asset that happened to also compete on Sunday afternoons, and the 10 times growth in 5 years, without a single championship to show for it, is the whole lesson. Before you write that check, understand what actually moves the number on your team's valuation. It was never really the trophies. It's the cost cap that stops you from losing money, the Concord Agreement that guarantees you get paid regardless, and the sponsors who were never really buying a chance to win. They were buying the logo on the car, and in this sport, that turned out to be worth more than the championship itself.